Hey everyone, welcome. My name's Heidi Hasting. I am a data analytics consultant in Australia. And today I've got a co-presenter. Dinesh, do you want to tell everyone about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eddie. Hello, everyone. I'm Dinesh. I'm Sri Lankan, based in Singapore. Been working with data warehousing, big data science for almost 22 years with SQL Server, Azure, Synapse, Databricks. I'm really excited to hear, share my experience and knowledge with you. Let's start.
I know, and it's not just us in this, and this is live streams, but you'll probably see our moderators in the chat. So we've got two moderators today. We've got Sunoj and we've got Allison. So do ask your questions, drop them in the chat, and let us answer those questions for you today. And if you want to follow along with us too, you can follow along with this session. So if you go aka.ms/live learn 2024 0229F, or just scan the QR code, that will take you to the live learn module that we're going to cover off in today's session. And we're going to talk all about all things data warehouse in Fabric. And this is live. That's right. We are broadcasting live 25th of April, 2024. We are live. This is not recorded. You can talk to us in the chat. You can ask questions, follow along. We've got some polls, so we're going to do some knowledge checks as well. And if you're watching this back later, unfortunately, it is recorded at that point. But if 25th of April is your time to watch, we are live. But we thought we'd also share some awesome resources with you. So if you haven't already, check out the Fabric Career Hub. So the Fabric Career Hub is your one-stop shop to all this information. It's got everything from what the challenges are, information about these live learn or learn together series. We've got exam crams. We've got practice tests. We have everything. You can even hear from people in the field of how they got into the data analytics space. Everything from people coming from business backgrounds, from developer backgrounds, from low code, citizen, you name it, it's there. It's your one-stop shop to learn all about Fabric. Shabnam is one of the people there that you can hear from, learn her journey and how she got started. It's really cool resource. But also, it's got practice tests. It's got information on how to schedule the exam, because there is DP600, a new exam. It's even got information about roles that you can do within the data field. You could be a data analyst. You could be a data engineer. You could be a data scientist. You can be anything you want. Check out those roles, because you might not know that you're already a data analyst under the hood. So again, check it out. Check out the Cloud Skills Challenge. You'll probably see a little bit later, we'll tell you about a discount code. So if you're looking to do the exam, that's right, if you are looking to do the exam. So these modules help prepare you for doing that exam. Give it a go. If you go ak.ms/fabric30 DTLI. Quick way to remember that, 30 days to learn it. That's right. You get 30 days from when you sign up to be able to take you through all these modules. We're doing one of them today, so you're already getting ahead. And then you can go ahead and schedule the exam. But you'll get 50% off if you complete all those modules within 30 days. So if you're following along with this live learn series, you're completing all the modules. You just need to go into the actual platform, register for the 30 days to learn, go through all the challenges, answer all the knowledge checks, and then wait for your discount code in your email. What else are we going to do? We're going to let you exam cram, because who loves studying on your own? Why not study with other people? And they're in multiple time zones, but we're going to tell you about the Australian one, because it's appropriate for people watching right now. And this is not the only session. This is partway through the series. This is the Wave 2 Live Learn or Learn Together Live Learn series. There are more sessions coming up later this week, next week. So do tune in. And if you can't make the Australian one, you can watch the ones in the other time zone. Or if your Spanish is your language, you can watch the Spanish track as well. And if you miss anything, don't worry. They're recorded, so you can come back and watch them later. But today we are going to focus on, what are we focusing on, Dinesh? What are they going to learn?
All right. So if you have already gone through Microsoft Docs, you have seen multiple learning paths, and this is all about one of the learning paths with Microsoft Fabric, data warehousing. So we are going to talk about what is this data warehouse, what are the things we need to consider when we try to design an analytical solution. Data warehouse is going to be a part of it. So we are going to take you through a set of slides that explaining what is data warehouse, concepts, consideration, and all. And the most important part is we are going to explain you, we are going to show you the way of designing a data warehouse using Microsoft Fabric. So let's talk about data warehouses, lake houses, and what are the things you need to consider when you design the data warehouse tables and load the data and then perform analytics on it. That's the plan for the day. All right. Okay. So I think we need to start with Fabric. Okay. So everyone talks about Fabric. Everyone is really, really excited to use Microsoft Fabric. There are so many Fabric items that can be used for implementing your analytical solutions. So Eddie, let's talk about Microsoft Fabrics. What do you really see? Like, when you go to the platform, what I'm going to see, can I use it for implementing my analytical solution?
Absolutely. So Microsoft Fabric, and I'm going to stress there, you got to put Microsoft in front of it because if you just put Fabric in your favorite search engine, you're going to get everything under the sun. So you want to put
Exactly.
Microsoft Fabric in there. It is a software as a service platform. You might have heard that bandied around in terminologies in the industry. So software as a service, it means it's also all encompassing. So this is an end-to-end analytics platform. So we've got something for everyone. So we've got things like real-time ingestion with your KQL and your Custo. We've got business intelligence stuff. We've got your Power BI, so you can do your visualizations. We've got data scientists being able to work in the platforms. They can do notebooks. They can do machine learning. They can do experiments. We've got data integration tools. We've got pipelines. We've got data flows. You name it, where there's a way to ingest that data in. Under the hood, the little behind the scenes, little golden magic thing is the little bloom, the little One Lake. One Lake is where it's going to all be stored. But the key one, which I think you're going to tell us more about, is the data warehouse.
All right. So basically, if I want to implement an analytical solution that has all the type of components, data warehouse, lakehouse, BI, and data science experiments, I can simply go to Fabric or the Microsoft Fabric and then use that platform for implementing my solution completely. Yes.
Yeah, and the thing I love is that it is for everyone together in one place. So now you're not going data engineers, you go here,
Exactly.
visualization people, you go here, data scientists, you go here, security, you go over here. No, we're all together in the one platform. We can work on the same
All right.
data. Super cool.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So let me highlight a few things on data warehousing. So this session is completely on data warehousing. We are going to focus on data warehousing. So why we have to consider Microsoft Fabric when we have to design a warehouse? We have been designing data warehouses for years, 20 years, 30 years, and we have used Microsoft SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Synapse like dedicated SQL pool, and we have used some Azure Databricks as well. So are we going to see the same? Now, when it's come to Microsoft Fabric, yes, you're going to see the same experience. You'll be designing the data warehouse, just like the way you have been designing with SQL Server, Azure, Synapse, and all. But there are a couple of things we have to know when it's come to Fabric. We are going to see Delta table. So that's why you see that powered by Delta Parquet. So we'll be implementing our data warehouse tables like Delta table. Okay, it will be appear as relational table, but you're going to see Delta table. When we talk about Delta table, we think that it is going to be whole thing is based on Spark. Can I use SQL? Yes, you can use SQL. It's simply, you'll be using the same set of SQL commands that have been used for years for working with your data warehouse with Fabric data warehouse. And there are many things here to Fabric, Microsoft Fabric warehouse. Now see the third highlighted one, decouple storage and processors. If you have worked with something like dedicated SQL pool in Synapse, you know that you see the storage separately and then compute environment separately. You're going to see the same thing, but the good thing is you don't need to configure it. Like when it's come to dedicated SQL pool, you have to configure your compute environment. Of course, storage is getting automatically configured. But here you don't need to do anything. It is getting automatically separated. You have resource pools for compute, resource pool for storage. So everything works really, really fine, and everything will be organized using something called workspaces. Okay, so we basically use workspaces for creating Microsoft Fabric and Fabric items. All right, I think we need to discuss few things related to data warehousing concepts. How we really, start with a data warehouse project. What are the things we have to consider? The concept behind it. What are things we need to consider when we designing the logical data warehouse components? So let's start with this. Hey, what are the fundamental things we see when it's come to data warehousing? Let's start with
Yes.
that, and then we'll go into the next couple of items.
You're absolutely right. There's some key fundamentals when it comes to data warehousing. Now, for those of you tuning in, you might already be seasoned professionals, so you can just, sit back and cruise along with us. Or if you're learning this for the first time, these are some great things to be aware of. Because the key thing with the data warehouse, you need to be able to ingest the data. So we need to be able to bring the data in. We need to be able to store that data. We need to have somewhere where we're storing it for reusability. Then we need to do transformations, because as much as everyone will tell you their data is clean and beautiful and everything just works, there's always something, whether it's, splitting the time off a date time, converting because of
Mhm.
time zones, it might be correcting some sales information, whatever the case may be. We need to do some transformations. And then we need to make it available for analysis. We need to be able to do analytics on that data. We need to be able to deliver it in visualizations and reporting. So we've got those core things that a data warehouse needs to deliver. And
Uh,
underpinning all that is security, which we'll cover off at the end.
all right, okay, that's great. So, Heidi, when we work with clients in terms of data warehouse projects, sometimes we get a question from the clients. They ask, okay, they ask something like this. Okay, we have our own databases that have been designed for business operations like sales, HR, marketing. So they have their own databases. So the question they ask is, why can't we use this database? Why you guys want to create a new database called data warehouse? Why can't we use the one we have already designed that has data? So can we discuss, the main reasons for moving our data from operational databases to something called data warehouse, and why we have to do it, and what are the things we have to consider?
Absolutely, and the key thing is you don't build one. They're building those databases for a purpose. It's to capture sales. It's to do fast writing. It's tied into an application, so it's designed to do those sorts of features and functionality. It might be to process your sales, process your orders, process transactions, store information about your business, but it's not necessarily there for analytics. So when it comes to
Mhm.
analytics, we need to shift it from that relational style to more of a star schema style. So you'll see on this slide where we talk about we need to identify what business processes are going through that operational system, that operational database. We need to look at the granularity of that data, because if we want to do analytics, we might want to roll up to say, hey, what are the sales for this manager, or what are the sales for this region? But it doesn't necessarily mean we don't want to dive deeper and see the actual transaction. So we need to look at that granularity. We need to look at what the groupings are, because there's always something we want to group the attributed information to. So we want to take that transactional data and go, hey, I might want to roll this up by my region, by my store, by my sales, by my product. Those are all considered to be dimensions, attributes that we want to group the information by, and we want to see it at that level. Then we've got our fact tables, and fact tables is all about the transactions. It's all about, the actual underlying record details. So it's this sale occurred on this date, and this was the customer, and this was what they bought, and this is how much it costs. That all goes
Mhm.
into our fact table. And then we've got to design the linkages between all those and look at things like hierarchies, because we might say, hey, this product is part of this category, or this country is part of this region, or this manager is part of this store. And then we want to look at things like surrogate keys. So we can say, hey, there's multiple versions of this particular, in this case, a book. And with that book, we need to know which version is which. So we have these surrogate keys that help us underlyingly check the versions. And then we've got this concept of slowly changing dimensions. That's a bit like a special dimension. So that slowly changing has a different set of types. So we've got everything
Mhm.
from, I think, 1 through 6. And with those types, it's the how we handle the dimensions. So, for example, a type 1 says, I only want to know the latest version of this thing. So if we've got a book and that book gets republished, we only want to know the latest date information about it. Who's the author and when did it get the latest published date. Or we might want to do versioning. So we go type 2, and that says, hey, every time something changes about this book, I want to have every version of it, because I might want to do analytics across the different versions. And we can't forget we need to optimize it, test it, and of course, document it so that people know how to use it and maintain it and build it. So we've got to go from our operational systems. They're designed to do transactions, processing, live. And then we're going to shift it and design it to be more analytical. So you'll see coming up, we talk about star schema, and that's how you can model it. But in this case, we can take our books and go, oh, there's all the information about the book, when it was published, who it was published by, and we can put that in a fact table. But then we can put all our authors in another dimension table. So we can then look at our books by our author, because an author might have multiple books, and we might want to know how many books they've published and when they were published. So we want to do that analytical modeling. So we go for a more star schema.
Mhm. All right. Okay.
And I think there's some things we need to consider. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay. So it's all about making sure the design we do is suitable for analytics, right? So that's why we do not use the relational database we have already designed for business operations. Am I right?
Exactly. We're trying not to muddy
Yeah.
the waters. We're trying to make sure that one is for one purpose, one is for the other. If you try and have one
All right.
thing do everything, it doesn't necessarily work out well.
Okay. Okay. Oh, when we design data warehouses, you just mentioned about the surrogate key, so that's cool. Uh, there are certain consideration we have to make, and we should know that okay, we don't use specific constraints, or we don't do all the things we have been doing when it's come to standard database design. So just to highlight these two, surrogate key and alternate key. So you just learn about surrogate key. So surrogate key is all about an additional key we set with our dimension table just to make sure that we identify the record uniquely. So as Heidi mentioned, you might get, for example, if you have a customer table as one of your dimension table, and if you're getting data from two different systems, and if you try to use the same, if you try to use the business key coming from these two sources, you might see two different customers with the same key. So in order to make sure that we don't see that type of conflicts, we introduce our own key, which is called as surrogate key. It's basically a column that is configuring the identity property, okay, and then it starts from one, and then when you insert the second record, it becomes 2, 3, 4. Now, that's how we maintain the surrogate key, and we always link that surrogate key with the fact table, okay. And of course, Heidi will be explaining the star schema, and you will understand how surrogate key links with the fact table. But basically, we always use this surrogate key as the key for our dimension table. What is alternate key in that case? That is something coming from your source. For example, let's say you have a SAP solution that contains customer data. So when you extract customer data, you get the primary key of these customers' records. So that is considered as the alternate key, and that is the business key coming from the source, and we maintain it at rest. So one advantage with maintaining alternate key, for example, if you're getting a change from the source, you need to identify the record in your data warehouse. Okay. So if you try to use surrogate key, you will not be able to figure out which record is related to this change record. But if you have the alternate key, which is the business key, then you can simply match it, find the record, and update it. So we always recommend you to have these two keys when you design your dimension specifically. But remember, when we design fact tables, we don't add surrogate key because it is not basically required. You'll be seeing all the surrogate keys related to dimension table in your fact tables as foreign keys. That's the way you have to design. Let's talk about more on these dimensions and facts and how we organize it. So Heidi, what do you think about this design? Is this the only design we see with data warehouses? Or I know that there's another one. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is two key ones, but the most popular one and the one that's recommended all over the place is the star schema. So you can see here the reason it's called that star schema is because when you lay it out visually, it looks like a star. But all it's doing is you keep that fact table centrally in the middle, and you have your dimensions linking off that. So anything you want to group by and you want to do aggregates by, you put those in your dimensions. But it means we can look at our sales by our customer, we can look at our sales by a date, and we can do a combination of the two. Really cool. And the other one, which is not a problem, you can still do the other one, right? This one is all about normalized, reduced duplication. So that's another thing, going from our operational systems, our relational, to our warehouses. We're deduplicating information. And this other one is snowflake. Why? Because it looks kind of like a snowflake when you lay it out visually. But this is sometimes frowned upon But it's not that it's a bad thing, right? There are times where a snowflake is appropriate. So we wanted to make sure you're aware of a snowflake design is a thing, and it's where you can have the central fact table out to a dimension table, but the dimensions themselves might have other dimensions linking off them. So you can see here, we might want to go a product and link into suppliers and categories for that product. So it makes sense to snowflake it out. So it is appropriate in some cases.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So, when it comes to data warehouse design, okay. So, the implementation I have done, I start with star schema, but at the end, what we see the snowflakes, because, we always see that, one or two dimensions are getting getting normalized, because we try our best to normalize our dimension table. But what we do is basically, whenever we get more and more fact table, and these facts have to be linked with certain parts of the dimension, that dimension has to split. So we have to normalize it. So most of the time I see snowflakes, but we try our best to sticking to star schema. I believe that that's a recommendation, right? If I'm not mistaken, SQL engine and most of the database engine we see, even with Fabric, if you have designed the whole thing based on star or aligning star schema, then we see some performance benefits as well. All right. Okay. So if you want to know more about star schema, okay, more about things Heidi explained, like dimension tables, fact tables, slowly changing dimension types, and all, scan this QR code. You will see a Microsoft document that explain all these things in detail. Okay. So just go through it, learn more on it. That will be really useful for your projects, and not only for your projects. If you are getting yourself prepared for the exam, will be really useful. All right. So we have been explaining many things related to data warehousing, the fundamental concepts and all. Now it's time to check your knowledge. All right. Let me show the question. Did you want to explain this?
Yes. Excellent.
All right.
And I will point out to everyone, if you're thinking about putting the answer in the chat, it doesn't go in the poll. We don't know what you
Oh,
put.
yes.
So
Yes.
totally get your phone out, scan that QR code, or type in aka.ms/polls. There will be 3 questions throughout, but today we're going to start with the first one. So we're going to look at which type of table should an insurance company use to store supplier attribute details for aggregating claims? Is it A, fact table, B, a dimension table, or C, a staging table? Now, I know earlier we talked about facts and dimensions, so I think there's a good chance it's A or B. We haven't covered off staging tables,
Yeah.
so I think we can be comfortable that that one's probably not. But what do you think, Dinesh? If we got supplier attributes,
I believe that, like, when it comes to supplier, I don't see transactions with it. It is something we use for analyzing transactions. So, if I know the difference between the transactions and the items or the components I use for analyzing my transaction, then this question is really easy. I can easily answer the question. But Heidi, now, third one, number C, it's staging, right? This is something we did not discuss. Just to highlight, what is this staging table? So remember, when we design data warehouses, in certain cases, we get the data into a staging environment. Sometimes your staging environment is inside the data warehouse, or sometimes in certain implementation, we maintain another container as a staging environment outside the data warehouse. So if you decide to maintain your staging environment inside the data warehouse, you're going to see a set of tables that hold data in a temporary manner. You get the data from one source to staging, and staging the table will be the source for updating your facts and dimensions. All right, I believe that everyone has answered the question. Is it? Let's see the answer now, right?
yes.
All right,
Woo.
okay. So, uh, is there a way of seeing all the answers? Everyone has selected dimension table.
We had a lot of people do dimension tables, so that's great
Ah,
that
right,
everyone
okay.
is
Yeah,
understanding.
okay. Okay, that's cool. It's cool. All right. Okay, so good. Like, everyone listen to us in that case, and everyone knows about, these concepts. So let's continue. Now we talk about fundamentals of data warehousing. Now it's time to know how to implement our data warehouse in Microsoft Fabric. So let's try to understand it. All right, understand Fabric's data warehouse experience. If we talk about certain items related to Microsoft Fabric data warehouse experience, so just remember, this is going to be a relational data warehouse, relational database. So, if you have implemented data warehouses with SQL Server, Azure SQL, dedicated SQL pooling, Synapse, and all, you know that you design or you create tables. You see something like create table, and it's going to be a relational table. You have the table name, set of columns along with the data types, and then you do the insert, update, delete. That's what you do, and you'll be doing the same thing with Microsoft Fabric data warehouse. Okay, but what you have to remember is, tables you create in your data warehouse are not standard relational tables. These tables are delta tables. Okay, so which mean you will be able to access your data warehouse table not just using TSQL. You'll be able to use Spark codes for accessing your data warehouse table. Let's talk about it. With it, if I'm not mistaken, we have one slide that explains few differences. So let's talk about these differences with that slide. In addition to that, if you have already gone through the other sessions related to this whole series, okay, we have a Fabric item, Microsoft Fabric item called Lakehouse. So if you have worked with lakehouses, if you have created lakehouses and then gone through features, characteristics of lakehouses, you have seen a facility that, okay, Lakehouse allows you to create tables. It allows you to load data to these tables, and these tables are again data tables. Okay. Now I just said that when we create the data warehouse, Fabric data warehouse, we have to create data tables as well. Or the tables we create are data tables. So in that case, I can simply use Lakehouse with data tables, or I can create a data warehouse and then create data tables. So when we have discussions with our clients in terms of designing data warehouse projects using Microsoft Fabric, one obvious question we get from clients is, okay, if we can have data tables in the lake house, why we have to go for something like data warehouse? So because we see the facilities for maintaining data, or the creating tables, maintaining data, querying data out for analytics and all, we see that support from both Lakehouse and the data warehouse. So Heidi, let's discuss the differences between Lakehouse and warehouse, and then let's try to come up with certain factors that can be used for determining whether, okay, I can stick it to the Lakehouse and that will be open as a data warehouse. That's one way of creating a data warehouse in Fabric. Or else, no, I cannot, or I'm not going to use Lakehouse. I'll be creating an explicit database. That's Microsoft Fabric data warehouse, and that is going to be open for analytics. So let's talk about it. This is going to be a really interesting conversation and the comparison as well. All right, what do you think?
I'm so glad you covered that off, really, because I know there's some questions in the chat. I know people have asked Lakehouse, Warehouse, what's the difference? Why do I need one? And I will point out, just because you have the option of a warehouse does not mean you have to use it. Yes, we're going to tell you all about Warehouse, but just because Fabric has all these features and options, you don't have to use them all. It's like this massive toolbox. You don't use every single tool to do a job. You use the right tool for the right job. So the key things, we talk about data volumes, no differentiator there. They both handle unlimited. If we're looking at the types, because often we talk about structured versus unstructured, yes, Lakehouse is going to be more appropriate for that unstructured data, and Warehouse is going to be more in tune with structured. Think your tables and your columns, right? So then when we're talking about who's using it, because remember, Fabric is for everyone. We've got that end-to-end analytics experience where all our personas are all operating together. So if you've got a team of data engineers who know SQL, why not put them in the tooling that they know really well and have them use Warehouse? They can use SQL. If they're using, Python and Spark and stuff like that, they might be better off in the Lakehouse. However, something to note is that both have a SQL endpoint. So the Lakehouse, You can work and run SQL queries against a lakehouse. The main difference there is that SQL analytical endpoint is more for viewing and for querying and getting results. Whereas if you want to do transformations, you want to have things like store procedures, functions, you want to create and save, views. You can do views in both, but you would do that in your warehouse. So we've got the different types of languages we can use. Lakehouse has a lot it can support. SQL is predominant with the warehouse one. So those are your key things early on. And then when you get to looking at it more deeply, you look, oh, I can do a multi-table transaction. What's that? Well, that's when you might want to update one table and have a cascading update into other tables. Lakehouse doesn't support that. Warehouse does. You can do
All right.
shortcuts across. You can do cross workspace querying. So these work together as well. So you can have your lakehouse and you can integrate it with your warehouse and you can use the extra features that warehouse might have and really maximize your SQL skill set within your team. But I know some people are asking in the chat, they've heard about this thing called medallion architecture and they're wondering, should they consider medallion? What do you think there, Dinesh? Is medallion something they need to take into consideration when they're
Yeah.
working with these?
Yes. So this is the architecture we use with most of the modern analytical solution. They started with something like Azure Databricks, and then we try to use this architecture with almost all data warehousing, big data implementation. In simple terms, this is all about making sure that you stage your data and open these data sets for the relevant audience. Now, as you see, there are three, I would say, containers or layers: bronze, silver, gold. So this is all about, maintaining data in different containers. Okay, but these data sets, for example, if you take the bronze layer, the bronze container, that has a data set with specific set of characteristics. So silver has its own characteristics. Gold is prepared for something else. So how do we really, figure out, what is bronze, what is silver, gold? I'll try to, brief that part. So we know that when we design a big data solution or data warehouse solutions, it's all about bringing data from some other system. We never have data entry screens for entering data for data warehouse. Okay, it's all about getting data from other sources. So when you bring data from other sources, what we do is once we have all the extracts, we want to maintain a container for keeping all these extracts. So when it's come to these extracts, could be CSV file, Parquet files, or something else, but we need to have a container. So that container is basically considered as row. It can be a table as well. Okay, so it can be a table, it can be a set of CSV file, or it can be a set of Parquet files. Okay, it can be data table as well. But what we basically do is we get the data from the source and maintaining as it is. We rarely make changes to the data in the bronze table. But we know that that data set is not suitable for analytics. Okay, so what we do is we consider the bronze layer as the source and then get the data from the bronze layer, make some processing. So as a part of this processing, we see validation, cleansing, applying certain business logic. Okay, checking whether records have null or odd values. We make all the changes and then move the data to silver. So now silver layer contains a rich data set which can be used for analytics. All right. Again, this silver layer can be formed using delta tables or set of CSV file. We don't use CSV file for maintaining silver layer, but what I'm saying is all these are possible. Most of the time, we'll be forming the silver layer with set of delta tables, or set of Parquet files. And the gold is an enhanced version of your data sets. For example, your silver layer contains sales records or the sales info with set of tables. But let's say one specific department want to get a specific set of records specifically for performing a specific experiment, let's say something like that. So in that case, I can create a new data set, okay, specifically for that requirement. So that's going to be my gold layer. Okay, now how do you see this with our data warehouse? There are multiple architectures, right? You can decide how you want to maintain these layers. Okay, for example, if I talk about the standard or the most common one I have used and I have seen, right? The bronze layer is going to be in a container in your Lakehouse. Okay, could be CSV file, could be something like Parquet files. Silver layer, again, you can decide to use the lake house itself. Okay, you'll be using a different lake house or the same lake house. It's up to you. You have to decide. Okay, and then you bring data from bronze to silver. Let's say you figure you form a set of delta tables for that as well. Okay, and when it's come to gold layer, if you want to open certain data sets with this facts and dimension structure, you can design a warehouse. So your goal layer becomes your data warehouse, all right? Or if you feel like, no, you want to have another lake house as a goal layer, that is also possible. There is no rule saying, okay, silver layer must be a lake house, gold layer must be a warehouse. No, it's up to you, right? But most of the time, we'll be having bronze layer and silver layer in our lake houses. And the gold layer, if you want, you can go for lake house, or else you'll be having it as a warehouse. Why we try to separate these things? It is all about satisfying business requirements. Okay. Now, for example, if you have a data science team, they might need to access raw data. Okay. For data science experiments. So they are not going to touch, or they're not going to connect with the silver layer, or they're not going to connect with gold layer. They will be simply connecting with raw, right? Or the bronze layer. But let's say there are a set of business users, they want to simply go through, certain facts, okay, and they want to make sure then they can do drilling down, slicing and dicing. So in that case, they will be connecting with the warehouse, which is configured as or configured in gold layer, right? So it's always better to align with this architecture and design your fabric component. So it's going to be a mix of lake houses, warehouses. That's why you see lake house plus warehouse better together. When it's come to implementation, we always see lake houses and warehouses. Now you know the difference between these two, okay? But try your best to use both for implementing your solution. But there can be a situation where you see everything in lake houses or everything in warehouses. It's up to you, all right? And when you open silver layer and gold layer for users, there are many components in Microsoft Fabric. For example, data science components can be used for connecting with these and then continue with your analytics. You can use Power BI for connecting with your silver layer and gold layer and then perform analytics. That's how we see. All right. So always consider the architecture, finalize it, and then bring your logical design to physical design. So when you bring logical design of your data warehouse that shows facts and dimensions, design with star schema or snowflake schema, okay, it's not like put all the things into a fabric and just create tables. There are certain things that have to be done. You have to make some consideration when you change your logical design to physical design. And that's what we are going to discuss with this slide, because it's really important. You should know how to convert your logical design to physical design. So, Heidi, let's talk about it. What are the considerations I have to make when I convert my logical design to physical design?
I know, before I cover off that, I just want to circle back slightly and just clarify. When I say multi-table, I meant multi-table transactions. So whilst
Oh, right. Okay.
Lakehouse and Warehouse both support tables, Warehouse is the only one that will support a multi-table transaction where you're updating multiple tables together.
Yeah.
And I know you just covered off Medallion, but I know some people in the chat are asking about data mesh. Yes, Fabric does support the data mesh architecture, and there's a specific feature that comes into play there. We're not covering off today, but there's one called domains. And also,
Exactly.
now that you've seen that intro into Medallion and a really great overview of how you look at that data quality going through the layers, and you can call those layers whatever you like. I've heard people talk about platinum and diamond before. It's whatever's appropriate for the business.
Yeah.
But just know that there's another session in this series deep diving into Medallion.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about those table considerations. You're absolutely right. When we're loading and looking at tables inside the Fabric data warehouse, we need to make sure we're looking at, do we want to have staging tables to have our data in stage before we process it through into those silver layers? Do we need to have any sort of surrogate keys occurring? Do we want that versioning? So we need to make sure, are we loading those versions with our surrogate keys? We need to look up the appropriate surrogate keys when we're loading our fact table to make sure that we're linking those transactions to the right version of that dimension data. And just because we're loading it all in doesn't mean we don't have to look at optimizing that data. So once we've loaded it, We need to look at, after we've loaded all that data, what are the optimization techniques we need to apply? We might look at the distribution statistics on our tables. We'll look at different indexes and make sure those are updated. So there are all these things we need to consider in the physical table as well. Once we've got that medallion architecture set up and we've got our ETL designed, we need to do those in addition to it. But that's not the only way we need to look at the tables. Is there's also some more information that Microsoft make available to you. Now, this changes all the time. So look at it today, look at those limitations, and then look at it tomorrow and see when the limitations change.
Yeah,
Microsoft
yeah.
has that Fabric
Yeah.
roadmap. So if you've never looked at the Fabric roadmap, you want to go aka.ms/Fabric roadmap and see what features are coming down the pipe, because it might change how you work with tables tomorrow.
Yes,
But
yes.
we got our
Yeah,
tables, we got our design.
yeah. Okay. So the couple of things in terms of physical table design. These are some of things I experience. And if you're designing, if I designing Fabric data warehouse tables, then of course you should know. So you know that these are data tables, not exactly relational tables we have seen. So when you design a table using let's say SQL, Azure SQL or SQL Server, you have set of data types. Remember, all the data types you have seen with SQL World are not going to be seen with Fabric. The reason is when it's come to data warehouse Fabric tables, these are data tables, so which mean only Spark data types can be used with it. So when I say Spark data types, you are not going to mention Spark data types with the create table statement. It is all about making sure that we don't use any incompatible types or the data types with the columns. For example, still you cannot use something like nvirchar or nchar, right? You cannot create columns with the max, and there are a couple of things like that. So just make sure that you know the available data types for Fabric tables. Okay. Another thing, we must highlight that you cannot create. You can create constraints like primary keys, foreign keys, unique constraints, or unique indexes, but you have to use the keyword called not enforce. Why? Because when it comes to data warehouse design, we do not really encourage you to add these constraints. We have seen it with all the data warehouse platforms, including Synapse as well. Okay, so it allows you to create these constraints, but you have to use not enforce keyword when you design it. So remember these things. When you design tables. Okay, so we talk about the logical part, we talk about the fundamentals and logical design, and we talk about a few things related to physical table design as well. When we have all the tables designed in Microsoft Fabric, we need to bring data from our sources. Okay, so let's talk about the ways of bringing data from sources to your Fabric warehouse. Heidi, you want to talk about it?
And you've just reminded me, between you and the chat with some questions, someone asked about partition tables as well. That's actually a limitation. Warehouse doesn't
Exactly.
support partition
Yes.
tables. So to answer that one off from the chat questions, that one's not supported, unfortunately. But
Yes,
when we're
Heidi,
looking at
let me.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Let me spend 1 minute on that. So we did a comparison on the Lakehouse data tables and warehouse data tables. Uh, Whether you use two different Microsoft Fabric items, when you query these two tables, same Spark engine will be used. But with the lake house you can create partition table. With the warehouse you cannot create partition table. Of course you'll be able to create it within, I believe that within the next couple of months. But since you can partition the data tables in lake house, you might see some performance gain when you compare lake house and the warehouse. Okay. But when you see the same facility with data warehouses, I don't think you will see a different. All right. So that's something I want to highlight because that's something I experienced with my data warehouse project. All right. Okay. So let's talk about data ingestion.
so glad you went through that one, because I know indexes is the same. Indexes, you can do some in
Yeah.
Synapse, you can't do some in Warehouse. So you can't do index views, you can't do unique indexes, but you can do other index types. So same but different. It's a bit like the terminology that's used. You'll see Fabric calls things Synapse Data Engineering, Synapse Data Warehouse. It doesn't mean it's feature parity with the Synapse product in Azure. It has the same name, but not feature parity. So with those ingestions, we've got so many options, and we've got options for both pro devs and citizen devs. So citizen devs, which are more your low code, no code solutions. So that's where we can do things like data flows. And data flows look a lot like Power Query if you've ever used Power Query in products like Power BI Desktop. We've got things like data pipelines, which is similar to Azure Data Factory. So you can create pipelines to move the data, whether you're moving data from on-prem environments, other ecosystems, or other Microsoft ecosystems as well, if you're moving things from Azure data in. We can also do SQL queries because Warehouse supports things like cross-workspace querying. And we can query from a warehouse back into a lakehouse. So when we're doing our warehouse for our gold layer, we can pull from our lakehouse in our silver layer, and we can have that in the same workspace or a different workspace. We can also use things like copy into. Copy into is where we might want to write a SQL command to say copy into this warehouse from this Azure storage location or other storage provider. There's also some fun stuff like mirroring and all that where you can get data in, and then you can use that in your warehouse later down the track. So we've got so many options. CTAS is still there. Query table as select. I think is its non-abbreviated description. So we've got so many options. You can even use notebooks to move data around. But when you're working with warehouses and SQL, more common to use pipelines, data flows, and SQL queries themselves.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So basically, we are talking about multiple ways of getting data into a house. We can use pipelines, we can use data flows, we can use cross database queries and all. That's good. There's so many options. So we have to make sure we select the right one for the right table. Now, I think we have been, talking about all these things for almost 30 minutes or more than 30 minutes. It's time to show something, right? So let's see the way of creating Microsoft Fabric warehouse. Okay, and let's try to see some table creation as well.
Yeah, so this is the Fabric interface. This is what you look like when you go to app.fabric.microsoft.com. You're greeted with this entry screen. Now, these are all buttons. So we want to look today at the Synapse Data Warehouse experience. So we're going to select that one. And you'll notice now our left navigation menu appears a little bit different. We get more options. The first thing we need to do, because everything in Fabric is containerized into a workspace. So within the workspace, we're going to create a new workspace. I'm just going to call that DP Fabric, and because I already have one, I will call it DP2. And recommend putting a description here. Now, how do we make sure that our workspace can support Fabric items? We need to make sure that our workspace is attributed to one or more of these specific things. It's either on a trial capacity, it's either on a premium capacity, or a Fabric capacity. Now, a trial capacity is a Fabric capacity. It's an F64 SKU. Doesn't allow you to play with Copilot though, but it is an F64. So we go ahead and create that workspace. And now, because my tenant is already Fabric enabled at the tenant level, that's another setting that your tenant would do. I'm a user who's allowed to create Fabric items, and I now have a workspace that's linked to a Fabric capacity. So we go ahead and create a warehouse. And I want to stress here, this menu is contextualized to what experience I've selected. So I'm in Data Warehouse, so I see all the warehousing options. So I'm going ahead and create a warehouse. So I'll call it My Data Warehouse. And we go ahead and create that. While that's creating, if you were to go into another experience and you wanted to create a warehouse, in that File New drop-down menu, right down the bottom is a thing that says More Options. When you're in More Options, it'll show you all the different items across the Fabric space. So you could create warehouses, you could create lake houses. So just that drop-down is filtered to the experience you're in to help you out. Now that we have our warehouse, you can see here we get our Warehouse Explorer, but I'm going to just shift quickly back into the Lakehouse to show you that not only do we get our warehouse, we get what's called a semantic model default attached to our warehouse. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the slides. But back in our warehouse, if we wanted to get data in and we're going to create our table, we use the new SQL query. Within new SQL query, we can say create a new SQL query. It's like a double up menu. And then within that, we can create a table. So we can write our SQL statement. As you see here, I can create a product table. and I can run that query. When I run that query, you'll see it shows the status of the query being run, and it also tells us when the query completes. And if there's any errors, it'll show those as well. And if we look back over in our Warehouse Explorer, we navigate into schemas and DBO and tables, and you can see here is our product table. And if we select that product table, we can see that it's empty. So if we want to insert some data in, we want to ingest. So we saw that one of the ways we can do that is with a SQL query. So if I go back and create a new SQL query and I paste this one in, so this is inserting in a couple of rows to that table. So we'll run that query and we see how it goes. So this is not the only way we can ingest data. This is just a quick and easy demo way. So if we come back over now to our product, we'll now see, and we need to refresh it. Go back up and refresh. And click off and back. I did this the other day. I have to go between a few things and then it will show it. I'll do it this way because I can. We'll actually show you this later, but so you can see the data is there. So we can query our data, we can ingest data, we can write different queries. Now, one thing to note is when you're doing all this, you notice down the bottom here, it's creating all those queries. So my SQL query 1, 2, 3, if I close these, they're still there. So you can see that my SQL query is still here. So I can go back in and see my original query. And if I want to share that with my team, I can move it to the shared queries and that becomes available. So just be cautious every time you run a query. It's going to create a new file over here. So you might get a bit messy. And you can go ahead and rename those. So we can rename that and say that's R1, create the product table. And we can do more things. So that's just creating one table. But we can run an entire warehouse script and create a full data warehouse structure. So I've got a pre-script already done here. So if we go in and do a new query, so this is quite an extensive script where we're going to set up a number of tables. So we're going to check if they exist, which is something we can do within the SQL query language. We can go ahead and create our product and insert way more data in. So I'm going to run that query. And then when we come back, once that's finished running, so you can see as it's going, it'll let me know where it's at within the execution. And as it stands, it shouldn't take too long. You can see here it's already created our customer, our date, our product, and our fact sales order. And now if we click on one of these, so you can see your data. So this is cool. We can toggle between querying and viewing the data. Now I know we're going to talk a little bit more about querying in the slides and the different ways you can query. So let's jump back into those slides and check out the different ways we can write a query.
Yes, Heidi, there are a couple of questions in the chat box, I guess. I think most of the questions have been answered, but let me take one or two and then add, explain it a bit. So one question I can see, it's on the data warehouse key. So it asks whether we can, create constraints and then continue with it. Yes, you can create constraints, like you can create foreign keys, primary keys, you can create unique index, but you have to use the not enforce, which means you cannot expect engine to validate the whole thing, right? So it's all about adding the constraint, and you'll be using these constraints. For example, foreign key constraint can be used for maintaining the relationships, but you have to use what do you call this not enforce keyword. And there's another question on says copy method support polybase. Yes, you have the copy method. It's not exactly polybase, but if you have worked with polybase or polybase objects, you know that you have to create multiple metadata objects like source object, format objects, credentials, and all the objects have to be created before you create external tables, right? And then only you connect with something like data lake to get the data into your warehouse. But you don't need to create all these metadata objects with Microsoft Fabric. What you have to do is you simply use the copy method. You connect with your, for example, let's say you're trying to get the data from data lake. You connect with it, get the data using copy method, and then insert into whatever the table you have, like dimension tables or fact table. So that's another. There's another question. All right. Okay. Can we create new schema? So Heidi just showed you the way of creating tables. So if you prefer to create your own schema, yes, you just use a statement like create schema, name of the schema, and then you get your tables created under that schema. All these are possible. All right. So now, we need to manage time as well. So let's talk about querying part. So the querying is like once you have the table design loaded data, you have to query your tables, right? So there are two ways of querying your Fabric data warehouse tables. As you see, two windows. One is the standard query window, something you have seen with Azure SQL database or something like Management Studio, and then you have visual design as well. Okay, so the first one is for people like or let's say people it's for basically data engineers. They prefer to write codes rather than constructing the SQL code using dragging and dropping. So you open the window and then you write statements, right? IntelliSense is there. That's really great. Okay, so you can simply write your select statement, insert statement, create stored procedures, and everything can be simply do with your query window. So that's one way. Second one is basically, let's say you're new to SQL world, but you have the data warehouse. Let's say you are a citizen developer, you are a business user, so you're not much familiar with SQL command. In that case, Fabrics allows you to get the result set generated. Okay, not just asking. It doesn't ask you to write the SQL statement. It helps you to construct the SQL statement using a canvas. So you can use this canvas to drag and drop table, combine it using various facilities given with this window. Okay, and then construct the SQL query, get the data, right? That's really useful, and I can see like when I do demos for my clients, they are really happy with it, because this means that data warehouse is not going to be limited to data engineers. Data warehouse can be directly accessed by business users, citizen developers, and then they can query the data out for their analytics. Okay, Heidi, let's see this as well, right? Rather than explaining through the slides, it's always better to see it, right? Okay, can you show us the way of using these two windows for querying out?
Absolutely. So we already showed how to do the new SQL query where we're writing a query. And by the way, the schema is in the template list, so you can automate to that. But let's show a new visual query. So with a visual query, we can drag and drop from our Explorer into the canvas. Picture it looking a bit like Power Query. So as I drag and drop these components in, it's going to place them onto the canvas, and it'll visualize the data down the bottom, so I can see the information straight away. Now, I'm going to go fact sales order. There we go. Now, good to point out, press this little button here, makes it go full screen. A lot more real estate to work with. And we can do things like look at the different steps that are occurring. We can go ahead and click fact sales order, and let's say I want to link the two data sets together. How do we do that? We can use merge. So I can add, scroll down to merge queries. I can go, yep, I'm going to go from fact sales order, and I'm going to look at the product key, and I'm going to merge that with product and product key. And I'm going to leave it as a left outer join here, so we can pick our different join types. Love the little Venn diagrams to explain those. And then that will go ahead and merge the information. And you see down the bottom, we've now got the option of our product table fields. So we can go ahead and hit the little double arrow symbol and say we want to keep the product name. And then we incorporate the product name. So now we've done a query that combines those two sets of information, our fact table with our dimension table, and we can go ahead and do things like filtering. So I can go ahead and say, hey, my boss has asked me to look at the cable lock statistics, so I can go ahead and look at those. And if we want, we can save that back to our warehouse. We can also visualize it. So if I go back into our wider Fabric landscape here, you'll see we've got options to download the file. We can visualize the results. We can save it as a table. So we've got that reusability. So that low-code, no-code approach allows us to quickly drag and drop and interact with the data. And our window down the bottom lets us navigate through as it's making changes. We can see what the results are going to be. So that's that no-code experience there. And I know we've got more things to tell everyone in our slides. We've got more things like semantic. What's this semantic data set that people keep talking about? Or semantic model, I believe is its current name. So let's flip back over to those slides and get through and talk more about other ways to work with the warehouse.
All right, okay. So now we know how to design our tables, get the data loaded to tables, and how to query out. But at the end, you have to somehow visualize your data. Okay, so You need to make sure you prepare your data set and then form the data set suitable for your visuals. So that's really important because at the end user sees these visuals. Okay, it's very rare to see end user come to the database and query out unless they have to perform some experiments. So let's talk about data preparation and reporting part. Good thing with Fabric, Microsoft Fabric warehouse is when you design your tables, when you design your warehouse with tables, right? It creates the model, which is going to be a semantic model, right? It creates the model that can be simply used for reporting. Okay, you can make modifications and then you can make it suitable for reporting and analytics, right? In addition to that, you can create your own semantic models as well. So it's something like Power BI, right? If you have used Power BI, you are familiar with models. So, Haley, let's talk about this default semantic models and the custom semantic model that can be, used and created in Fabric environments, and then let's see how we can use it. Can you highlight a few things on the default one? Yeah, go ahead.
It's amazing with the default semantic model. So it appears in a few different places. So the reason it says default is when you create either a lakehouse or a warehouse, Fabric goes ahead and says you're probably going to want a model. So it creates that default semantic model for both of them. So you saw when we created the warehouse earlier, it automatically went ahead and created our semantic model default. That's, as Dinesh said, it's not the only semantic model. You can go ahead and build a custom semantic model because you might want ones for your different business domains. So you might want a semantic model for your sales, a semantic model for your finance. Think things like your data vault architectures. But that semantic model means we can model our data. So in the warehouse, we've got our various tables. We can model those and create the relationships so we can make that centrally available to our analysts. We can also add measures. So that semantic model in both cases is where you can add your measures. You can define where you want to hide fields or hide entire tables, whether the case may be. But the difference between the default and the non-default is the default's just created for you and has default in the name. So when you're looking at the type field, you will see default there. Sometimes it's a little bit hit and miss with its behaviors. So often you will want to create a new semantic data set, even though the default one is created for you. But it's up to you. You can look at the different options. And if you head on over to the Microsoft Docs, you can see all the different limitations that are with that semantic model.
Okay, all right. Okay, so now we have a semantic model that can be used for reporting. So let's check whether you listen to us. Okay, it's time to check your knowledge. Right? We have the second question. Hey, do you want to read it? Or you want to?
Yeah, so when we look at what is the semantic model in a data warehouse experience, is it a semantic model is a business-oriented data model that provides a consistent and reusable representation of a data across the organization? Is it B, a semantic model is a physical data model that describes the structure of the data stored in the data warehouse? Or is it C, a semantic model is a machine learning model that is used to make predictions based on the data in the data warehouse?
Okay, so by looking at these three answers, we didn't talk about anything related to data science. Okay, so you know, I believe that everyone understand that. Okay, so the model, the semantic model, is not something related to data science. So of course, it is all about AOB, right?
Exactly. I mean, our data scientists can certainly work with our warehouse and they can work
Yeah.
with a semantic model. So that's a great thing about that semantic model, but it's really targeted at our business users who want to use the data to be able to produce reports and visualize the information. So I know we talked a lot about physical modeling earlier, but we didn't really talk about it in that modeling space. So I think
Yep.
I reckon A is probably the one we want to focus on because it is that reusable model, because we can have a number of different reports all pointing to the one model.
Model, yes, exactly. So I believe that most of you have given the answer. So let's see the right answer. So this is the
Yay.
right answer. I hope most of you have, or almost all you have given the right answer, right? It's not that hard. Okay. So anything else to be discussed on this, Heidi? You want to highlight anything else on this? All good?
I think the only thing is to stress with modeling is if you're used to working with like Excel and your single file, this is where
Mm.
you've got to adapt and introduce modeling into your world before you do the visuals. So in Excel, you would
Yeah.
have had the single file and gone, oh, let's create a pivot table, let's create a chart. But when we're working with products like Fabric, we have to take that one table, slice it up into our star schema design, and then we model it so everyone knows how the different star schema elements work together.
Okay. All right. Okay, so now let's see how we can visualize data. So in terms of the visualizing, you can simply open Power BI within Microsoft Fabric, and then you can create your report with multiple visuals. So it's easy to work with it. You go to the model, you'll be seeing a button called Create Report or something like that. You click on it, and then Power BI interface is getting open inside the Fabric. Of course, you can use Power BI Desktop or Power BI Service for connecting with your data sets. Okay, so the data set is the older name or the former name for this model. The new name is the semantic model. So if you will still hear that someone refers this container as a data set, or someone refers this as semantic model. Remember, semantic model data sets are the same. Okay, right. So if you want to really visualize data, you can simply use Power BI. You can create reports. You can get the data from the model, or you can directly connect with the data warehouse. That is also possible. I hope, like, if you have used Power BI, you know there are multiple methods of getting data into your Power BI model: direct query, import. Okay, but when it's come to Fabric, we highly recommend you to use direct lake mode. Okay, because that give in terms of the performance, that's significant. I have implemented solutions with Fabric and the Power BI. We see a significant difference between direct query and direct lake. All right. So let's have a look on that as well. Let's see how we can create Power BI reports against our data warehouse. So it's again the demo time. This is going to be our last demo, right?
This is, in fact, the last demo, but we wanted to make sure you saw in person how to change the relationships and you also saw how to visualize that data. So if we look at what we had before, so this is back in our data warehouse, the model that you see down the bottom there, if we click the model experience, we are looking at the default model there. So anytime you're in the warehouse and you click model, you're looking at the default model. So if we go ahead, you can see I've got no relationships between my tables. And there's a couple of little Microsoft behind the scenes tables that automatically appear. We can click the little hide button to hide those from the model. Or it has a refresh problem. Happens from time to time. But we'll keep going. So we can link between. So we drag from the fact table to the dimension. And you can see here we're creating a new relationship. I'm going to leave it as many to one and the cardinally there, and the cross direction I'm going to leave as single. But if you've worked with Power BI, you've probably experienced these sorts of things before. If you're new to it, this is creating relationships between tables. So we drag and drop our customer one, same thing. And last but not least, our date one. So we can link from our date to our date key and then save. Now, if ever we want to edit any of those, we can also expand the properties window and make changes. And we can always come back and view this model. And what's cool is now we can just hit new report and we can go ahead and visualize our data. We say, yes, we're going to look at our default semantic model and I'd like all these things to be available for it. And while that's cruising through creating, if you wanted to create a new semantic model, you can do that from inside the warehouse, or you can do it from the new, actually not from the new menu, only from inside the warehouse. So now you can see we've got this in-browser experience to be able to create our report. So if we want to look at our sales total by our product category, and I can drag and drop this, and I'm going to change it to a different visual, and we can go ahead and do our formatting. So for those of you who might be Mac users or who have colleagues that are Mac users, suddenly they can now do Power BI reporting in the browser, which is really cool. So we'll bump up the font. So now you can see straight away I'm visualizing that data. And as Dinesh said, this is using the direct lake mode because it's using the tables. If it was using views, unfortunately, they're not supported. But you can see how rapidly responsive this is. We don't have a heck of a lot of data, but still very easy. You can interact with it. And then we go, we like that report. Let's save it. So I can go ahead and save this report into my workspace as my sales report. And just the same with we did that visual query, we can visualize the results in a report and it'll create a similar experience. The difference would be the tables on the right would be from the query results, and you can go ahead and visualize and save the report as you did before. And if you're in the warehouse, you go, that's really cool. I'd like a new semantic model. This is the menu option. So you can go ahead and say, create a new semantic model. I'll call it sales model. I can say, look, I would like DBO and I would like my customer and my product, same things for this one. And that's going to create a new model. And in the workspace, you're going to see that as a separate item within the workspace. It's not going to be sort of under indented on the warehouse because it's not the default one, but it will show in the lineage that it is affiliated with this warehouse. So we can still see all the models that are linked to our warehouse, whether they're the default one or whether they are the inbuilt one. So if we shift here, you can see as this is loading, we now have our two models of the same warehouse, but the key thing is one is the default and one is the model. So when we want to edit our default one, go into the warehouse, click model. When we want to do our other one, we can click into that and say edit the model. And when you're looking at it in the list view, you've got the indentation there or the semantic model there. So you get both. So it's pretty cool. You can do all those things and all of it in the browser. So as long as you've got a good stable internet connection, you're all good to go. Nothing you need to do there. But I know there's some really important stuff we haven't covered. Security. Security
Yeah.
in Fabric. So let's go ahead and switch back to our slides and finish off talking about the remaining features of this data warehouse experience that we have.
Yes, yes. So, like, once you have the data warehouse, yes, you'll be opening it for business users, applications, data science team, and all. But you need to make sure that your data set is protected. So there are, a few additional steps that have been taken, to protect your database. So when we talk about securing, of course, you have to monitor as a part of the securing. So you will be considering you'll be considering securing the entire workspace. That's how you start with it. Okay. And once the security strategy is defined for at the workspace level, then you come to your fabric items. So let's say it's warehouse. So what are the things we can do with the warehouse? Can I use the same techniques I have used before, or can I, or there are new functionalities that can be used to protecting my database? We have been using things like database or data masking, encryption, many things with Azure SQL database and SQL Server. Can I use the same set of things? What about the role? What do you call RLS, right? Row level access, or the protecting or setting authorization on column level, object level. So all these are possible. So let's talk about this. What are the considerations we have to make when we design the security strategy for our Microsoft Fabric warehouse? What do you think, Heidi? I think.
Security is, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about security, but I love security, right? And I know there's some confusion in the market, in the community around, does Fabric have security? Because there was the whole talk of one security. It's like, yeah, Fabric has always had security. It's just we always want to enhance and add more features. So the one security or the universal security is what they're introducing in the roadmap. So that's the new features and functionality, but it doesn't mean Fabric doesn't have security. One thing that Warehouse also has over Lakehouse is Warehouse can do dynamic data masking and it can do row level security. Yes, we can do row level security in our semantic model, but Warehouse has it inbuilt as functionality, whereas Lakehouse doesn't. Lakehouse is getting some changes. They're in preview. You can see that more granular security. We can do that role-based access control. People are familiar that if you're coming from the Azure world. We can do SSL encryption, so thinking about things like encryption at rest, encryption in transit. We can look at using products like Azure Monitor and Log Analytics because we might want to monitor and audit anyone who's working with. So if you're in Australia and you've got IRAP standards at a federal level, if you're working in other countries, GDPR, SOX, all those sorts of things, we might want to look at our Log Analytics to be able to see who's using our warehouse, when are they using it, what are they using it for. We also want to look at things that Microsoft Entra, our Active Directory approach. We can use multi-factor authentication. So you can make sure that when people are connecting to Fabric, they are multi-factor authenticating in, give you an extra layer of security there. And we can also use those identities across to access our warehouse. So we've got so many different options to keep our warehouse secure and available. And I know people are probably talking about things like Purview. Yes, Purview exists in Fabric. Purview's kind of got like 3 versions of Purview, but you can integrate the Microsoft Purview product to scan your Fabric tenant and look at the lineage and look at your glossaries and look at your sensitivity classification information. And within inside Fabric itself, we have the Purview Hub, which is a little bit of a subset, allows you to see your sensitivity levels. So Purview exists inside the product and as its own product that integrates well. But I think, Dinesh, you've got some more security considerations that we might want to take into account, don't we?
Yeah. Yes. Now, as I mentioned, with the previous slide, so when we talk about opening our database, we can actually think about 2 areas which can be used for configuring the authorization techniques. So one is the workspace. I'm sure that you have gone through our previous sessions like this, and these workspace permissions have been already discussed. So you know that there are 4 roles that can be used for opening your workspace to business users. For example, if you have added someone to the viewer role of your workspace, that person can simply read data from your data warehouse. Okay, he will be automatically getting select or the data read permission. So you don't need to do anything else. As when, for example, if I'm a member of your workspace viewer role, and if you have a data warehouse created, yes, I can access it, I can read it. I cannot do any modification, I can read it. But let's say now, when I'm in my when I'm in your viewer role, okay, so I can read any tables. But if you want to make sure that you simply allow me to read only few tables, that is also possible. In that case, what you have to do is, yes, you make him as a member of the viewer role, but you can customize it, or you can simply add more into the authorization by using SQL engine itself. For example, you can use something like deny permission for me for specific set of tables. So which means I have read permission, so I can connect with my data, your data warehouse. Okay, but I will not be able to query all the tables, that because you have used deny permission statement for blocking me on certain set of tables. So that is also possible. So you can use both workspace permission or item level permissions, table level, column level at the SQL end. Okay, and then you can simply implement your whatever the strategy you want to implement for your authorizations. Okay, so in addition to that, you can connect with your data warehouse using the client tools, like for example, Management Studio. If you want to connect with your Fabric warehouse using Management Studio, yes, you will be able to get the connection string, use that, and then use Management Studio for connecting with your warehouse. Connection string, that's going to be the server name. And then remember, Fabric does not support SQL authentication, right? No SQL authentication. You have to simply continue with your AAD or Entra ID authentication. Okay. So what you have to do is, if you're connecting with your data warehouse using Management Studio, server name is going to be a SQL connection string, which is available in Fabric settings, Fabric warehouse settings, and user ID and passwords are simply your Active Directory accounts. Okay, so that's how you work with what you call security, authentication, and authorization. So I know that when you work with security, you have to keep on you have to keep on monitoring what's happening with my database, who's accessing it. Everyone everyone sees data as they want, or they experience some slowness and all. So Heidi, let's talk about the monitoring part, and I can see the most common dynamic management views we have been using with SQL engines, right? So all these are available with Fabric. What do you think?
Yeah, you can reuse a lot of the techniques. So if you have worked in Azure SQL or SQL Server, you want to look at, well, who's running what query when. You can use those inbuilt DMVs. So not everything is supported in the monitoring space, but it is a quick way, because things you want to look for is long-running queries. You want to look at who's running the query, when are they running the query. You want to look at how many queries are being run. So we can use these to see what our resource utilization is and check for our optimal performance techniques. So there's a number of other ways we can do monitoring. This is not the only way, but this is an inbuilt way. So we can start running queries. So you saw us do the new query. We can do a new query, select from DM exec connections, and see all the connections that are with our warehouse currently. So if you're starting to see some performance hits, look at these DMVs to see what's going on with your warehouse. You can also, and I don't think we cover it off in the slides, but just be mindful. If you're an admin on a workspace, you can use the kill command to kill someone's session. If you have an analyst who's not so great at writing queries and starts to bring your warehouse to a grinding halt, you may want to kill that session. The admin role within the workspace has that ability to kill a session. And here's an example of how we could query to look for whose sessions are running long, because we might want to look at those and go, okay, these seem to be happening a lot. Let's look at changing up our warehouse design to make those queries more optimal, or let's look at some training and education for our users on how to write queries. So we've got some options there. And I know now that we've talked about security and we've talked about monitoring, let's make sure you've understood what's been going on behind the scenes. Let's do one of those all U-Butte knowledge checks that we have. So you
Yes.
get your phones out, chuck the URL in the browser. We're going to look at what is the purpose of item permissions in a workspace. Is it A, to grant access to all items within a workspace? Is it B, to grant access to a specific column within a table? Or is it C, to grant access to individual warehouse for downstream consumption? And I know this can be a little bit confusing. The key thing in that question is item permissions. So when we talk about item permissions, Dinesh covered that off between the difference between a workspace permission being all and a item permission being individual. So a little bit of a hint there. And I can see we've got
I
some
think
votes
like
coming through.
everyone should consider these item paths as fabric items. So if you reform the question,
Yes.
saying what is the purpose of fabric item permissions, I think you can figure out the answer easily.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And we've got some votes coming through. Oh, a bit of a mixed bag in the results. It is an interesting one. When Fabric has layering throughout, caching is layered throughout, security is layered throughout. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard to figure out which layer we're talking about. So in this case, we are looking at that Fabric item level, so the individual. So that rules out A and B. And then we're looking at what do we do with a permission? Well, that allows someone to use it downstream. So whether that's SSMS, ADS, the default semantic model, it's a report. So the answer is C.
See, yes. All right.
And we are live. Remember, everyone, we are live. We know you've had a number of questions. So we can rapidly go
Yes.
through the summary and then answer as many questions as we can in the break.
Sure. Okay. So let me quickly summarize what we discussed, and then we'll go for questions. I think we have about 8 minutes. So we talk about data warehouse fundamentals. We explain you why you have to design a warehouse when you have OLTP databases. We explain it, and if you are going to design the data warehouse, what are the concepts? What are the considerations you have to make? So we talk about the star schema, snowflake schema, and then we talk about certain consideration you have to make when you convert your logical design to physical design. And then we talk about Microsoft Fabric. We talk about Fabric warehouses and how to create Fabric warehouse. What are the things you need to consider when you design Fabric warehouse tables? And then, of course, we talk about the differences between Fabric data warehouse and Lakehouse, because you need to decide what to be picked. Okay. And then we showed the way of getting data into Microsoft Fabric data warehouse tables, and then query them out and create visuals and all. So we have covered many things. Of course, we don't have time for discussing everything in details, but we try our best to explain most important things related to Microsoft Fabric data warehousing, and then we showed you many things. All right, let's go through the questions before we take you through the last set of slides. All right, let's see.
So I think there's some interesting questions. People are asking about autoloader. Autoloader is a feature that Databricks has. It's not a
Oh, right.
feature that Fabric has.
Yeah. Okay.
So you'll find things that even though both Databricks and Microsoft Fabric are working on that Delta Parquet format, doesn't necessarily mean they're feature parity between the vendors. So there are things like Microsoft has V ordering, Databricks has Z ordering, Databricks has autoloader, Microsoft does not yet have that matching feature. So no would be the short answer. People are asking about whether DP600, which is a lot of the content we're going, overlaps with PL300. DP600 is more an extension into the enterprise data management platforms, data analytics, data architectures. There are overlaps because things like Power BI exist in both exams, but you will find that the DP600 is more of a deep dive and more into things like your Spark and using the data engineering side, the data science side, the data activator side, like all the different features of Fabric, whereas PL300 is more focused on Power BI. So there's overlap, yes, because Power BI has an experience in Fabric. DP600 is more of a deep dive. I don't know if you want to answer, Dinesh. There was some early on ones that I thought you might want to cover.
Okay. There's a question on it says Fabric tables handles distributions like Synapse. Now the good thing with Fabric Warehouse, you don't need to worry about the distribution. So I know that you have worked with Synapse dedicated SQL pool. So when you design Synapse dedicated SQL pool tables, you need to decide whether this table has to be configured with round robin or hash. Even if you select hash, you have to struggle a lot to deciding which column must be used for hashing. I have struggled a lot on that because we initially pick a column and then after 3 months we realize that okay, this is not the right hash column. So the whole thing has to be changed. And we are not talking about tables with like 100,000, 200,000 records. We are talking about tables with billions records. That's what we see. But the good thing with Microsoft Fabric is you don't need to worry about distribution. You're not going to mention that this is a hash distributed tables or round robin table. No, you just create the table. Everything will be taken care by Microsoft Fabric. You don't need to worry about it. But remember, it's a distributed table. Your data is going to be distributed. Only thing is you're not going to explicitly setting the distribution method. It happens automatically. Okay, that's a good question. Okay, let me see any other questions we have not answered yet. Distribution. Okay.
That last one's a key one there, where someone's asked, what is a Fabric item? So just to clarify that, when we talk about an item, so Fabric Warehouse, when you create a warehouse, that's considered an item. If you're creating a new semantic model, that's an item. If you're creating a report, that is an item. So kind of that workspace list, you will see the items. Now, we are close to time, so I'm going to just shift back to the slides so we can wrap today's session. Really appreciate all those questions. Remember, this is live, delivered 25th of April. So if you have more questions, drop them in the chat. We will try and address them after the session. So don't forget to follow along. You saw us cover a lot of the content that is actually in that Learn Live module. So if you go through that module, you are completing one of, I think, 13 modules required for the 30 Days to Learn It challenge. And don't worry if you sign up for the challenge and you've already done some of the modules, it will recognize that you've already gone through them, and it'll show you in your completion status that you've already completed a number of the modules. We talked about today's session. Tomorrow's session is, next week, April 30th, is going to cover the medallion architecture in depth. And so you can see here on the schedule, you've already looked at Spark, Delta Lake, Data Factory, Data Flow. The all-important one is right at the end. I mean, all of them are important, but don't forget you need to know how to administer the Microsoft Fabric platform. I know sometimes it's a secondary task for many people. It's a shared responsibility, but check out the remaining sessions of Medallion. Don't forget, you can ask questions. So it's always optimal to join these live. And don't forget to register for the 30 Days to Learn It Challenge, Fabric 30 DTLI. You can sign up for that anytime. That clock starts when you register. So if you're a bit busy this week, hold off until next week. And when you do register, you can go ahead and have 30 days to learn the content. And if you're keen to try out Fabric, why not sign up for the trial? Now, something to be mindful of, do hit the learn more, right? And the reason I say that is you can enable the trial. It's an individual who can enable it. So as long as your tenant is allowed to use Fabric items, speak to your tenant admin to make sure that's enabled, you can go ahead and sign up for the trial and start creating workspaces. You get an F64 capacity, which is really cool. It's like halfway through the pricing. So we started in F2 and we go all the way up. F64 is about the middle. But make sure when you do that, it's a capacity. So if you want to share with your colleagues, you don't all have to sign up for the trial. You can put a workspace into that trial capacity and give your colleagues access to the workspace, and you can all go try out Fabric in that workspace. There's a great article on the docs about sharing a capacity with others. Dinesh, is there anything else you think we need to cover off for our awesome listeners today?
Everything has been discussed, and then I believe that we have answered all the questions. So a lot more to discuss. I love to share my experience on Microsoft Fabric, but not with this session for sure. So all good.
I would be remiss if I didn't thank our awesome moderators that have been hanging out in the chat and answering all your questions. I know there has been so many, so shout outs to Sunoj and to Allison. I know you've been doing a fabulous job. I did a quick check on the chat, so thank you so much. And thank you to our producer, Matt. I know he said not to mention him, but I'm like, we got to thank him. He's doing an awesome job with this series. Check out the content, connect with us on the various social media platforms, and ask your questions. We'll be more than happy to help you. And I hope you learned a lot.
Yeah. All
Yay!
right. That's all from our end. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again from another session.
Thanks, everyone.